Hello, it's 2023 and I have been racing. This video is going to look a little different than what you're probably used to, and for good reason. Too often I hear racers in their, maybe not their videos, but in their interviews and things saying, oh, the car was good, we did a lot of work back in the shop, this and that. It's all just a bunch of sweet nothings to me, and so I wanted to change it up with this video and take a look at everything from finances to the engineering on the car and the setup, and then take a look at most race teams' most guarded secret, the notebook. No, this notebook. Before we dive in completely, I just want to mention that racing is one of those things where everybody has an opinion, and it's always a competition. I just want to share my experiences, and not everything you will see here is going to be the right way to do things. Not everybody shares the same opinion on what the right way to do things is. So these are going to be decisions informed by my unique experiences that have informed these decisions. So I know there's going to be people out there that disagree with the things that I do and with the setup and everything, and I'm sure they found their way to the comment section by now. So with that being said, let's dive in. So race 1 of the 2023 season saw us making the 2.5-hour trip down to Baps Motor Speedway, one of my favorite tracks down near York, PA. So every weekend, I like to take my notebook and fill it up with a starting point. So it has a bunch of setup details, though not all the setup details are on this page. It's missing some of the less frequently changed things, and also, if you're keen and can spot this, it's missing my spring setup, and that is a separate book that I have prepared exclusively by Laser Chassis with my spring smash numbers. I don't have a functioning spring smasher myself, and I actually have a project one that I'm building right here. I'm going to show you. If you can see this, it is not ready to work yet. The scale head is not reading correctly, and I don't know if it's the load cell or the scale head. But this is a whole project and a whole nother video, so yeah. But anyway, so because I don't have a functioning spring smasher, I don't tune too often with springs. And I know a lot of old school guys will say, oh, well, you don't need the smasher. But for me, I feel like in order to make an informed decision and make a change and stray away from where I'm at and then be able to get back to where I'm at, I need to have the smasher to sort of take notes and write down and get, be able to get exactly to where I need to be. So I don't change springs in this video, but that might change in the future. Anyway, I also wanted to note that on my setup sheet you might have noticed shock numbers. And I just want to point out my shocks are JRI shocks, and the compression on them is a dial from 1 to 6, with 6 being the hardest. Meanwhile, the rebounds is a clicker on the bottom that goes from -1 to -50 or beyond, depending on which corner you're at on the car. And so that is how it's written in the book. If you see like -50, you understand that that's 50 clicks away from full stiff. When I initially recorded this, I didn't have the blessing to share my spring settings with you guys yet, since I didn't come up with these. These are from Laser. But now that I have the permission, I can talk about it with this disembodied voice that you hear now. So just going quickly over the springs, the right front is something I want to point out. It's a stack setup where the 175 engages first so that the right front can sort of travel a long distance, and then once it gets to its ride height, the 400-pound spring engages and holds that corner of the car up so that the right front doesn't dig into the ground. That's the theory, at least, and what that does is it seals the nose of the car off to the track while still riding pretty high when the car's sitting in the pits, so that it kind of teeters the left rear and pushes the left rear into the ground. So the theory behind the left rear is it's got a digressive stack that when the car's sitting in the pits, it sort of sits lower on the left rear and has, not as much load. But then as it starts to travel, it engages to the point where then the load sort of picks up. But then when it's in the pits, it'll be legal so that when they come around and measure the deck height is lower. The left front and right rear are pretty standard. The left front is a little lighter than some people like to run, but my car sometimes has trouble turning, so I'm running a 400-pound spring to sort of help the car turn when I get off the throttle. I do want to mention that other setup things that I have on my car actually are published online. Laser Chassis publishes their setup books. They're the only chassis manufacturer that I know that does this in late models. And that's one thing I love about Laser. It's not a huge secret what they're doing. So I'll share that with you guys here. I'll put it in the description. So if you wanted to check out the rest of my baseline setup, it's all pretty much contained within that document. So I wanted to mention, before we left for BAPS, I purchased some fuel. I spent $80 to fill up 4 cans of fuel, which should be enough for the night. I might have had some cans left over from last year. But that's what I did, and I also purchased 2 new rear tires so I could have them for the future, because I took a look at my tires and my rears are pretty heavily used to start the season. So picked up 2 new tires at $2 1/4 each. At the track, I paid for my team's pit entry, so that was $35 each, totaling around $175. I'm not totally sure if it's $35 or $30 down at BAPS. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. The track was soaked from rain showers that were passing through, and it delayed the start of the race till well into the evening. So that puts us at the heat race, the first event of the night. The first event of the evening was the heat race, and the heat race is lined up via a random draw. So when you get to the track, you pull a little number out of a bag, and it tells you kind of where you're going to line up for the heat race. And the finishing order of the heat race generally determines where you line up for the main event, the feature, at the end of the night. So it's important to get a good finish in the heat race so then you can line up in a good spot for the feature. I worked super hard on my GoPro footage here to sort of add some annotations with my lap times and a tracker to give you an idea of what lap it is and what position I'm in. So hopefully you guys appreciate the hard work I put in here. It helps me follow along the race, and I can sort of see my lap times and tell where I was doing good and where I was doing bad. So at the beginning of the race here, I noticed that my car sort of felt a little bit off, like the power down the straightaways wasn't exactly the same as what I'm used to, but I was still keeping up with everybody, so I didn't know if it was just that I hadn't been in the car for a while. It was just maybe feeling weird or something was amiss, but since I was keeping up with everybody in front of me, I decided that I wasn't going to pull off the track. Turns out, after the race, I was able to determine that one of my plug wires had come off, so that was kind of hampering my speed. However, you'll see here that I wasn't that slow. Towards the end of this event, I turned the fastest lap time of anybody on the track. So I guess it must have been slimy enough that having a little bit less horsepower ended up being an advantage. Anyway, I'll shut up and let the rest of the heat race play out.
Ooh, super sketchy across the line. Almost got into a huge crash. Put my car probably where it shouldn't have been. The 9 had no idea it was there. But yes, we ended up finishing 4th.
So, since the car felt pretty fast and I knew that I was down a cylinder, I didn't adjust anything for feature time. I know that some people might cringe at that idea, but since this is the first race of the year and one of the first few races that I've been at the track without my dad, it was most important to me to make sure that my car was safe and that everything was tight instead of going through and making changes on a car that already felt pretty good. There's the old adage, oh, if it's fast in the heat race, it's not going to be fast in the feature. Well, in this case, I didn't want to tempt it, and I just wanted to stick to my guns. So we lined up 8th for the feature. So on the rear of the car, I had new Hoosier number 2 tires, and then on the front, I had 1300s like normal. So I could feel early on that the tires weren't as hooked up as I wanted them to be, and it's my fault. I shot myself in the foot when I mounted those tires up. I bought them during the week and didn't give myself enough time to grind them. So whenever you buy a new Hoosier tire, you want to grind it to get the skin from the factory off the tire because the mold kind of leaves like this sort of little bit harder skin. So you always want to grind them before you end up on the track. In this case, I didn't do that, and I sorely was missing it in the car my first few laps because the car felt very loose on exit. I was just getting in the throttle and I could see that other cars were taking off and I was having a really hard time keeping up. But after a few laps of struggling, I was able to find my balance, my rhythm in the car. But right around this time is when, of course, do you remember that plug wire from the heat race? Well, I thought I had it clicked on. It sounded like it clicked on. I tugged on it. It didn't come back off. Well, it just so happened to find its way back off the cylinder a couple laps into the feature. So I think it was maybe the second caution in or third caution in that came off. And for the rest of the race, I knew that I wouldn't be able to make up any time on the high side. So I set myself to the bottom. And unfortunately, the bottom was kind of a follow the leader. I didn't have enough power, it felt, to get up off the corner and get by anybody down the straightaway. And then on corner entry, there's just not enough room to get underneath somebody if they're also running the bottom. So
Anyway, I'll shut up now. Here's our feature.
So at the end of this one, I picked up 8th place, which, although I was disappointed in the car that one of my cylinders wasn't firing like what could have been, I was pretty happy to load up the car in one piece, knowing that I'm the one that has to fix it during the week. If I don't have to fix anything, we've had a good night. Obviously, we want to do better, but that night, first race of the year, I was happy with it. And I wrote in my notebook that the car was excellent, bad for the first few laps, got to grind the tires, and it had 7 cylinders, so we have to fix that for next time. No changes desired. So, we'll see what that's like next time I revisit Babs, and if the car will be as excellent. To conclude our finances for the weekend, I had to spend $100 filling up the F-150 truck that tows the hauler down to the track and back. So with that $100 there, that brings up the weekend total to $805. So to me that sounds pretty steep, but the majority of that cost came from the tires, of course. And the tires were in very good shape after the feature. I looked at them. The tread depth hadn't gone down that much at all, and the front of the block, the edge that you want to dig into the ground, still felt pretty good. So I was able to save those and use those for different races in the future to save me some money elsewhere. In case you're curious, my family and I didn't get home until 4 a.m. the next day. So, long haul, that one. If you enjoyed this one and you like this format, let me know. I have a lot more footage from other races this year, so please look forward to more content. It's on the horizon. I promise I won't forget about you guys. If I see you at the track, stop by, say hello, and thanks for sticking around with me, guys. Oh, and if you like this shirt, you can buy it. I have a new website called camber.house. Camber.house. It's an interesting domain name, I know. But it's a little endeavor that I've been working on, and I have my merch on there, so we'll see what that turns into. But if you like this shirt, go ahead and buy one. And every cent that you spend there goes right back into the race car that's sitting right behind the camera. So, alright guys, see you later.